Hey, what is up guys? This is Nishi from MST.TV here, back with another Market Watch episode. So we are at a point where the market is a bit slower. We haven't seen too many huge changes over the last couple of weeks. This is going to be a great time though for us to look ahead for some buying opportunities because things definitely will not stay this way for long. That being said, we are covering a few of the smaller trends we've seen over the last little while to make sure that we don't miss anything. And maybe later on this week, we'll look at some cards that you guys should be picking up in order to get ready for 2023. Let's get started. So first up, we're looking at Satellar Knight Deneb. So after what feels like ages, we finally got some Satellar Knight support, and it's actually quite good. Satellar Knights used to be a pretty solid archetype back in the Duelist Alliance format. They were kind of annoying because they relied pretty heavily on floodgates to help them beat decks like Nekroz and Shaddolls, but a lot of players really liked them because they were fairly straightforward to play. They also never actually got hit directly on the ban list. Rota used to be at 3 and it was hit to 1 eventually, but aside from Ptolemaeus, which was unrelated, there weren't any Satellar Knight cards hit themselves. They just kind of got like power crept out of the game. Now we have a few new cards announced to be coming in Cyberstorm Access, the core set after Photon Hypernova, including some interesting main deck cards and new Xyz monsters, which seem really cool. I don't think it's enough to make them competitive or meta relevant, but this is bringing new life back to a deck that used to be pretty popular, so naturally a lot of people will be excited and want to pick up the strategy. Deneb is of course a key card for the deck, searching for any Tellar Knight monster on summon, and it's basically something that you want to try and summon every single turn in order to get as many searches as possible. That being said, with the new support, Deneb has been targeted for a buyout. The card has just 2 ultra rare printings, the original and then its Megatin reprint. Either of those printings is going to cost you between $20 and $25 at the moment, which I personally think is pretty crazy. Of course, since I think the deck won't be that great, I wouldn't really think it's a great idea to buy into this card myself. I think you're much better off waiting for the support to come to the TCG and wait for the deck to flop, and then after that you can consider picking the stuff up if you really want to try it out. At any rate, we should expect Deneb to be reprinted in a reprint set closer to the release of Cyberstorm Access. So we're looking at a couple of other Tellar Knight monsters here where the idea is kind of the same as with Deneb. A Knucklehigh and Altair are 2 main deck monsters for the Satellar Knight deck, and each of them played a very key role for the strategy. A Knucklehigh dumps a Tellar Knight monster from the deck to the graveyard. This would usually be a copy of Deneb that you could then revive with Altair or Call of the Haunted in order to get a search, and Altair is the one that revives another Tellar Knight monster from your graveyard, which was hopefully Deneb so that you could search another Tellar Knight monster. Pretty straightforward. I think that in Duelist Alliance, a Knucklehigh was a common while Altair was a rare. However, each of these got exactly 1 holo printing as an upgrade in Astral Pack 7. This was a bit late because the upgrades came in June of 2015, and then the ban list that ended the Duelist Alliance format was November of the same year. So because of this hit, these super upgrades have actually been pretty cheap for most of their lifetime, only $1 or $2. Now, however, with the Tellar Knight support coming, we see each of them shooting up in price to where they're now $8 to $10 for a single copy. I don't know exactly if the deck will still max out on these cards with the new support, but it's definitely cool to see these old decks get revitalized. Just keep in mind though that you do have lower rarity printings of each of these cards available, so it isn't exactly necessary for you to go out and bling your deck out with these holo upgrades while they are so inflated. It's even possible that the Tellar Knights reprints will come in something like a Magnificent Mavens or a Ghost from the Past, where everything is printed holo to boost the theme's availability and appeal more to casual players. Although I do think it's reasonable to keep a set of each of these cards for yourself if you're a really big fan of the deck and you want to play with it eventually. I personally would be okay with just playing the lower rarities and then selling off the holo versions in order to maximize your value back. Next up, let's take a look at Visas Starfrost. So I feel like with each of the last few themes that have come out, we always end up seeing a buyout of Visas Starfrost because it's mentioned on all of these different archetypes cards, much like how Fallen of Albaz used to be. Well, after Scareclaw, Tearlaments, and Kashtira, the next archetype in the lore is the Manadome, which are going to be coming out in Cyberstorm Access. To be fair though, from what I can see, the Manadome do seem to be the archetype that is able to best abuse Visas Starfrost, since Visas can destroy the Manadome monsters and proc their effects. Of course, this could just be an overreaction because the deck is just brand new, but I think the deck looks interesting at the very least. Anyways, just like we've seen before, Visa Starfrost has had yet another upward trend. We were seeing the secret rares down at around $8 to $10. Those are now up to $17 each. And then with the ultra rares from the sneak peek, those were around $15 before. They're now up to between $22 and $25. Honestly, nothing too crazy. I don't think it's really anything like more than the amounts that we've seen Visas jump up to before, but it's still worth noting that at this particular moment, the card is up rather than down. I don't think we'll see anything too crazy from Visas moving forward, but Dimension Force is also a bit of an older set now, so there's probably not going to be as many people just like randomly pulling it and trying to offload it to bring its price down, so this time it might take a bit longer for Visa Starfrost to cool down in price. Alright, let's move on to Ariana the Labyrinth Servant. So Labyrinth are my favorite fun deck to play right now. The deck is so simple, but it can do some really awesome things. Now apparently over in the OCG, after the ban list that kind of slaughtered tier limits, Labyrinth are a pretty viable strategy. They're probably one of the top 5 decks in the game over there at the moment. Ariana is absolutely one of the more important cards in the strategy. On summon, this searches for any Labyrinth card from your deck, which is usually going to be either Lady Labyrinth or the Welcome Labyrinth. It also draws you a card if a trap makes a monster leave the field, which is always welcome as well. The deck gets even better here in the TCG after next set, since we're getting Big Welcome, which is a really big boost. Even in a game where we have Lightning Storm, Feather Duster, and Evenly Matched running around, Labyrinth can still be a really scary deck to have to play against if you allow them to set up and gain a lot of card advantage. Because of this hype that the deck is seeing in the OCG, and with the assumption that the deck will do well here in the TCG eventually, Ariana has been trending upwards over the last few weeks. The Ultras used to be down between $10 and $15, and they are now up to $30 each. And with the collector's rares, those used to be as cheap as $70 to $80. They are now up to a solid $100 a piece. This is basically a brand new archetype that hasn't been around for very long, so it shouldn't be reprinted anytime soon. And since it's an easy to play waifu archetype, I think there's a decent chance that Konami might actually want to see the deck succeed and stick around in the game. If you guys can still find someone selling Labyrinth cards for cheap, I would try to grab the core. Otherwise, you might want to try and grab it once the prices settle down. The cards will almost definitely trend back upwards in another ban list or two. The next card for us to take a look at is Security Dragon. This is one that we're only going to take a look at quickly. It's not too big of a price spike here. Security Dragon is a generic Link 2 monster that, if it is co-linked, lets you target an opponent's monster on their side of the field and return it to the hand. So before players use this card with Akashic Magician to abuse Grinder Golem. Fortunately, Grinder Golem was banned pretty promptly here in the TCG. It's currently banned both in the TCG and OCG, and because of this, Security Dragon hasn't really had its time to shine. Now in Dark Worlds, Security Dragon has a purpose once again where you can use Akashic Magician and Security Dragon to bounce Ceruli multiple times in the Dark World strategy, and make it so that your opponent's card effect is making you discard a card from your hand multiple times. In theory, Security Dragon is never really a bad card, it's just not an amazing one because it requires the link arrows to be set up fairly specifically, but for now it has a pretty strong application in one of the more popular decks this format. As a result, Security Dragon has gone from being $1 or $2 to now being $4 each, and this may seem surprising to some, but Security Dragon's one printing came from back in Dual Power, which actually came out like 3 years ago now, which is kind of weird because it feels like not that long ago that this card first came out. Anyways, if you guys do happen to have Security Dragon lying around in your bulk somewhere, you might want to dig it out now because it might only be a matter of time before the card sees a random reprint before it has a chance to get too expensive. Up next, we have Messenger of Peace. This is a very old card, first coming out back in Spell Ruler, which was the third core set to ever be released. It has a really straightforward effect where at the cost of 100 life points per turn, all monsters with 1500 attack points or more cannot declare an attack. So I guess there are some players that really miss having Mystic Mine in the game and wish that they could play an equally degenerate strategy in the current format. One such player actually managed to make top 32 at the Remote Duel YCS from last weekend, where he used Messenger of Peace and various floodgates to effectively stop his opponent from doing anything while decking them out with the runic cards. I guess it's certainly a creative way to go about doing things, although admittedly, it doesn't sound like a very fun one to play against, but I guess to each their own. Anyways, the main version of Messenger of Peace that jumped in price is the Duelist League Color Rares, which I'm personally not too fond of, but I guess they are the hardest to find printing, so they get treated as the highest rarity. If you're looking to buy one now, it depends on the color printing, but you probably need to spend like $10 per copy. But when I look at the various sold listings of the card, I don't see many that have sold for more than $4 to $5 each. Alternatively, there is the original Super Rares, which got a couple of waves of printing between the original Magic Ruler and the reprint Spell Ruler, and then there's a couple of old rare printings as well. Each of those is going to be around $5 each. Fortunately, this card has one or two common printings from like the legendary decks, I think. You should be able to grab those for only $1 each if you really want to play them. Nothing too exciting to see from this card here, but if you happen to be sitting on some copies of Messenger of Peace and you know of like a degenerate player at your locals, maybe you want to try and entice them to see if you can offload this card while it's seeing a bit of hype. Alright, so the last thing we're going to take a look at for today is Super Heavy Samurai Trumpeter, but really we're going to be talking about Super Heavy Samurais, not necessarily just Trumpeter, right? So apparently Super Heavy Samurais are a somewhat popular archetype with some of the player base. They're an archetype that goes to play no spells and trap cards aside from maybe like a Sekka's Light or something. Now I'm not gonna lie guys, I know basically nothing about this deck or what it tries to do. However, apparently they are going to be getting a new card as a V-Jump promo over in the OCG, so I want to take a second and talk a bit about the strategy. Now most of the cards from the archetype haven't received that many printings, probably because the archetype has never really been that competitive. However, a lot of the cards follow a similar line of printings. They have the original, and then a tin reprint, and then maybe they have a star pack printing as well, and that's kind of it. So even with a lot of the synchros, like the Shuten Doji or the Susanoo, they're fairly difficult to find just at like locals because they've received such odd printings and they're quite old at this point. So if people want to play Super Heavy Samurais, it's actually quite difficult to find a lot of the cards. That being said, I don't think you guys should go out and actively look to buy and invest in Super Heavy Samurai stuff at its current market price, since the demand just probably isn't going to be there. But rather, I think that if you guys do buy a collection or you're shifting through your bulk, take a second to look up Super Heavy Samurai cards and you might just be surprised. Trumpeter, the one that we're showing here, only has 2 super rare printings and then it came out in a star pack as well. Yet all of those printings are going to cost you at least $4 each, and cards like this are things that people will overlook initially, but when you do find someone who has been struggling to find this card for a while, they'll probably be willing to pay up for it. Alright guys, that is it for today's Market Watch episode. Nothing too crazy this week, but I wanted to try to do at least one more Market Watch before Christmas. I hope that all of you guys get to spend time with your loved ones, and hopefully Santa leaves some packs under your Christmas trees as well. Anyways guys, if you did enjoy today's Market Watch, make sure that you guys hit that thumbs up button for me. Also make sure you let me know in the comments section down below. Let me know what you guys think about the cards we talked about today and what other cards are currently trending on the market. Also, if you haven't already, do make sure that you guys hit that subscribe button. And until next time guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.